All right, welcome to our next session of building an authentic operational plan for DEI and supporting diversity in the entrepreneurial workforce. I'm joined with four panelists today, Betty Artez, Sonia Stovall, Ricardo Cabrera, and Fred Davis. I'm Jenny Loper. I'll be your moderator today. I'm the Director of Operations at Zebulon Solutions. My background is in operational consulting and helping companies take their products really from that final stage of development into manufacturing. Zebulon is an end-to-end product development firm, and we help with a lot of companies, small startups, large corporations, take their ideas from concept all the way through the end of manufacturing. I would like to introduce our panelists today. I'll start with Betty Artez. She's an immigrant who was born in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and raised and educated in New York City. She has been a bilingual educator, government worker, mother, real estate agent, restaurateur, and food entrepreneur. The longest and most fulfilling role, aside from motherhood, was the ownership and management of Casa Alvarez restaurant in Boulder, one of the largest and longest running Mexican restaurants. But after 20 years, the restaurant closed and a new company emerged, Casa Alvarez Foods, that produces and sells the restaurant's award-winning chili, sauces, and to retail and wholesale outlets. This last venture is a work in progress with some of the same ruling principles as all the other ventures. Know your why, have fun, and give back. We also have Sonia Stovall. She's a professor that loves educating people on how embracing diversity creates space for authenticity and innovation for everyone. From parents to educators, entrepreneurs to businesses looking to interconnect DEI principles in their mission. Sonia earned her diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workspace certificate from the University of South Florida's Muma College of Business. She earned her law degree from Creighton University and took her constitutional law seminar with Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, with whom she respectfully disagreed with about her homework. Having taught diversity for nearly 10 years, Sonia encourages others to embrace the cultural adventures found in everyday life. One of her own diversity adventures involved taking line dancing class in Korean. Ricardo Cabrera is a business professional and real estate agent. He focuses on helping with wealth building matters, from assisting people in buying or disposing of their home, their most important asset, to assisting on business matters to the Latino Chamber of Commerce and coaching on NAPR 10 disciplines on wealth creation. Ricardo believes in working hard, living on less than what you make, and investing the difference with the goal of attaining wealth. Frederick Davis is an accomplished diversity, equity, and inclusion professor with experience as a senior leader. He acquired his bachelor's degree at Colorado State University, where he was a 3-year letterman in football, and received his master's degree from San Francisco State University. Before starting his current role as the Director of Cultural and Diversity for a Washington financial services company, he worked as a senior leader for a tech startup and for 3 Fortune 500 companies as part of their talent acquisition and global diversity and inclusion human resources areas. Fred's strong reputation has been built on his educational background, work experience, drive, passion, and leadership skills. I'm really looking forward to this panel today with the diversity topic, and look forward to where we're going to go with this today. So we will have 4 topics in our conversation. One, briefly looking at the definition of DEI, some roadblocks to having a culture of DEI in your organization, educating your organization, and then how do you hire a DEI community? I will take a break for a couple minutes between each of the topics to give you a chance to ask questions. So let's go ahead and get into our first topic, the definition of DEI. For those of you who are watching, we'd love to have some engagement from you today. So why don't you go ahead and either in the chat window or in the questions, how would you define DEI? Have you even ever heard of the acronym? And then how does this focus on DEI affect you personally? If you would mind sharing that would be great. While you're answering that, I'm going to go ahead and ask the panelists, who can give us a working definition of DEI today? Come on, Fred.
Come on, Fred.
The expert.
I'll start off.
It's in your job title.
By no means do I, claim to be the sole person with this, especially with this panel. But to me, what I truly enjoy about the work around the diversity work is that it's it's inclusive in its definition, right? I've often said, I actually had to just share this with some leaders where I'm at now, is that if I do my job right, no one's excluded from the work, right? So it's more than just gender and race. We're talking about vet status, ability, economic level, all these aspects of it. And that's the diversity part of it to me. And that's, to me, I have found that to be useful, even with those that aren't drinking from the Kool-Aid, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, I'm Sonia Stovall. For me, I think in the workspace area, the E is almost the most important in this particular acronym. It looks like my panelists, co-panelists agree with me. When it comes to the E in the EDI, the workspace equity, so that everyone gets those opportunities, everyone has that chance to be seen, I think is the most important in this acronym on this particular panel. They're all very important, but when it comes to work, equity, so that everyone gets that same opportunity is very important, I think.
May I?
Please.
Go ahead.
And to that point, there's an image that I've seen over and over of 3 young children trying to watch a game on the other side of the fence, and one is tall, one is medium size, and one is short. And they all have access, but not equal access. So the next image is a box where the shortest one can have the same view, and then another box where the medium-sized one can have the same view. So as an employer, to provide those boxes so that all of your employees, your community, have equal access to the same thing. You can say, yeah, everybody's got it, but they don't have equal access.
That's great imagery.
Well, I'll chime in, and I'll have to say I cheated because I went on the internet and looked up the definition of DEI, which, by the way, is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And what the internet says is that DEI is it's defined as a set of programs that encourage representation, participation of diverse groups. And diverse groups include genders, races, ethnicities, abilities, disabilities, religious differences, cultures, ages, sexual orientations, diverse backgrounds, skills, and expertise. I think overall access is the most important word to use here. So thank you for that, Betty, because access is, is limited by many things, including technology, financial access, technology access, physical access. Maybe I just can't get to a building. And all of those things are our community's task to elevate the DEI environment.
Thank you for going on the internet and looking up the definition. I think that helped you put the words to the image that he gave us. So thank you for that. What are some of the goals of DEI?
Well, as an employer, I think the most important thing is to create a space in your work area or in your company that will attract and retain people of diverse backgrounds in a way that they want to be there, that they are enjoying the environment and they can be the best that they can be, as productive. And that is community building. That is incumbent on the employer to build within the organization and in the surrounding community by encouraging volunteer, not paying your employees to go out and volunteer if that's what you have to do, but really encouraging that engagement within the organization and the community. And then diverse workers and professionals, they'll want to work for that organization and want to elevate it to the best that could be as well. So I think that's a big goal for businesses.
No, not just to be a silo within their own organization, but to make an impact on the community that what they're serving.
Yes.
I would, in addition to that, to what was shared, I have found, especially with the places that I've worked, it's kind of a healthy balance between ROI and social justice, right? So especially now over the last year. You know, if as an employer, especially for the entrepreneurs that are listening in, you know, if it would be inauthentic if you just said, I want to do this because it's the right thing to do, it's our mission, but without realizing that there's an ROI to it. For example, if you're, I guess I know one of the questions or one of the sections is about recruiting. For recruiting, we want to do it, we want to cast a wider net to get the best talent.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's why we want to make sure that we're doing DEI work, right, for example. In regards to products and services and designing and innovation, we can all kind of speak to that, the aspect from there. But I think, once again, for the audience here, be honest. You're doing it because you want to have an excellent business. Mm-hmm. You want to be seen as one of the at the forefront of what you're doing. You got to have an authentic, holistic, comprehensive DEI program.
Yep. Absolutely. You can't do DEI inauthentically and have ROI on it and have it pay back for you. So, yeah, absolutely.
So the question was, what are some of the goals for DEI? I think working with the Latino Chamber and seeing the community development for me is an important goal for DEI. Whether it's personal, economic development, that's either an individual or a business. I think the ultimate goal for this DEI programs is to elevate community development to be inclusive, as the words say, inclusive, equitable, and diverse. And you have to be genuine. Thank you for that. To be able to do this, you can't fake it.
Well, I think everyone here has talked about authenticity in some fashion, but I think that has to start with you, the entrepreneur, and the people who are making that mission statement. And a lot of that comes from who are you and where are you at in your DEI journey? Have you faced your own implicit bias? Do you understand what that is? Do you have those tools? Are you discussing that with your coworkers, your partners, whoever you're either starting up with or in business with? Where is that coming from? It can't just be, oh, this looks good and this is trendy right now. It needs to be, this is how we're going to get the best people, and then we're going to come up with a plan on how we're going to keep them, and we're going to make that part of our operations. It's not just going to be on paper, and it's just not going to be culture talk. It's going to be something that we can follow through with.
I think you've already started talking a little bit about a potential roadblock that is very hard to be authentic if you haven't done that work yourself. And so we do have a question coming in actually for you, Sonia, and I'll go ahead and just read this to you. You bring up a great point about working and keeping people. Realistically, we are all dealing with COVID, the COVID overhaul. Is there anything that is free out there that we can do now with employees or people to start a conversation and see if we are all on the same page?
Oh, well, thank you for the question. I certainly appreciate that. One of the things I've done for a long time now is teach diversity in criminal justice. And that's not just about Black and brown people being in jail, which a lot of classes are. So to that question, one of the first things I do with my class is we do the implicit association test from Harvard. That's free. You can go online right now and look that up. It's called projectimplicit.com, I believe, or you can just Google Harvard implicit bias. And that's something that you can do today. You can start a conversation with whomever you're with today. And I had a police officer in class, and he actually talked about how he did this. Because I made them, but it's great. The students actually really enjoy it. I hope they all do it. And those who feel comfortable share. And he discovered that he had an implicit association, a bias against people who were overweight. And he was very surprised by that. So you'll learn something about yourself. And so there's a freebie from me to you.
Thanks for that freebie. All right. Let's go ahead and start. Betty, do you want to
Can I
add to
just
that?
add that
Sure.
there are a lot of free things that you could do by taking the initiative yourself in connecting with people who don't look like you, and starting groups like we started a group sharing stories that matter, and basically spread the word and scheduled some Zoom calls, and people shared stories. People of all races and colors and nationalities, and it was fascinating to get to know people that didn't look like us. And it just opened up so many doors to additional learning. And I think that's the piece that we need to understand, is that we're always learning, that we're evolving. And now the doors are so open, the floodgates are open. And, DEI is a buzzword and an acronym and all this, but it's always been there, but now it's at the forefront. Take advantage and create your own groups that will help you identify how you see people and how maybe you should be seeing people. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, let's talk a little bit about roadblocks and get into our next topic. So what are some of the roadblocks that you've encountered or have observed that have hindered DEI?
I'll start again.
Take it, Fred.
It's just been, it's been a hell of a political 4 years, right? 4 or 5 plus years, and I think the inability for people of different sizes, different perspectives to communicate effectively, and to come to a solution has been key, right? And as I alluded to before, not everyone's drinking from the Kool-Aid, which is fine, but especially as they perceive DEI work. But I think some of the roadblocks have been some of the things that we've all probably historically read. There are some people who just, they're cautious about doing it and they want to take it slow. They want to pick and choose which aspect of diversity they want to do. Let's just deal with this for now, right? Because that whole prayer during the day thing, that whole LGBTQ, that's too much, right? Let's just deal with race and gender. And it's all or nothing. To me, it's all or nothing. Right, and there's an effective way to do it. You can build pillars and then try to build other pillars, and each year, each fiscal quarter, whatever you want to do. But to just say we're not going to get to that issue is just, I think it's an ineffective way to do it, and it's going to come back to bite you at some point. So those are my roadblocks. It's
be focused on one area and not considering the whole.
Yeah, and that's me from a kind of infrastructure kind of corporate kind of thing, that it's embedded. It's just tough to break that wall because there's so many people who are holding up that wall. You know what I mean?
Yeah, from my perspective, there's fear of trying something new. Maybe one of the assumptions, or that's not an assumption, but the point that I want to make is that assumptions always create roadblocks, and the assumption are those things that we don't know. So somebody may have all the intentions to create a inclusive, a diverse environment in their business, but because of their assumptions, they're going to create a gap unintentionally, maybe, by trying to do good. So, I'm not trying to give you an answer to how to solve it. There's always different ways to try to solve that, but it always starts with the person, right? You have to be open to understand that you don't know everything, and sometimes you may learn more than when you think. Just by trying something, get over a fear and just start a conversation, start an action, and be prepared for the reaction. Because this, talking about DEI, and I can't remember who I was telling earlier, is let's see what comes out of this, because it's like talking about religion or politics. It's very personal, it's very subjective, and but it's a beautiful thing. In the end, I think the fact that we're talking about it here is already a step in the right direction.
Briefly, just building on what you said about fear and what you were saying earlier, well, all of you actually. So one of the things I have my students do is to overcome their fear and also have some fun is food. Food is a great way for you to step out of your comfort zone and meet people who don't look like you, who don't come from the same part of the world as you. And so I would have kind of a quiz, and you'd have to go to a place where you've never been before, And I would know, because at the beginning of class, I would say, what are you comfortable with? And then I would make you do the exact opposite the whole time. But I'm doing that because I'm going to do that myself. You know, when I took that line dance class and everyone was speaking Korean, I did not expect them to suddenly speak English just because I was there or because I was invited. They invited me there into their space. And so it was for me to be there, for me to learn. And so you've got to do both. So if you're looking for an easy way to step out of your comfort zone, I say go to your local market, food place you've never been, you're a little curious about. Talk to those people. They would love to share their story with you.
Go ahead.
Roadblock.
Yes, roadblocks.
I think it's seceding power. I think many people in power are afraid. And so that fear, like Ricardo said, shows up, and they will allow up to a certain point, but then no more, because that will encroach on their power. So as a CEO of a company or a startup, or you have to look at your own sense of, am I willing to share my power? And then, of course, as a citizen of the world, you also have to consider, am I the majority? And if I am, I've got so many privileges, and then I don't want to give them up. So what do I do to hold on to my privileges? So I think that, like we've all been saying, it starts with the person. You need to do that work and see how much you're willing to give up to have a more inclusive and diverse company.
So Betty, I have a surprise question for you. It's not on the list. So
Okay.
this, so would you consider that this is a two-way street?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're the majority or the minority, DEI works both ways, in both directions. So just like the majority feels not empowered, but they have certain things that
Privileges.
The minority, being cultural differences or religion, whatever the difference is, we do live in the majority world, and even though I'm not discounting fairness and propriety, we should somehow learn to ourselves to fit into the majority world.
Well, then you're talking about fitting into the majority world, as you're saying, is the white privileged world, is the where most companies operate from.
Mm-hmm.
The boards of directors, the rules, and everything else is based on that majority. But does that work for everybody? It works for the people in power. How decisions are made, it's majority rules. Well, does that work for everybody? So those are the kind of ethical questions, really, that we are looking at.
Something you bring up, an interesting point, is that within business, that it is up, there are people who set the rules, but then people who are wanting to have change, wanting to have actual effective change within the organization. What are a couple ways businesses can address the roadblocks that have been identified by people who are interested in making actual change within the organization?
Well, one of the ways, and correct me if can you just repeat that last
Sure.
little
What
part
are a
there?
couple ways businesses can address the source of the roadblocks? Or the roadblocks themselves? Either way, either question.
So I think for business, as I said early on, I think that operationalizing equity is a big one, and I'm happy to talk more about that later. But also, one of the things I wanted to bring up, and that we spoke about before when we were meeting one another, is there's legislation out there that businesses need to be aware of. And a simple question could be, if I were to come and apply with you right now, with my hair the way that it is in a protective style, is that seen as professional in the majority heteronormative type world? And a lot of people would say no, that they wouldn't consider it. They would, they want it to be straight. They want it to look as assimilate, they want it to assimilate with the white standard of beauty that the United States has been, I don't want to say shoving down our throats for years, but it's tough. It's tough when that's not, everybody doesn't look like Jennifer Aniston, and that's okay. I think that's great. So that's something I think businesses need to ask themselves. The first roadblock is obviously you, as we've discussed. So if I come in and I look like this, are you looking at this, or do you want to look at my resume that says that I have a law degree? Do you want to look at my resume that says that I've had classes with these, Supreme Court justices, that sort of thing? Or are you concerned that I'm going to be front of the place, and what are your customers going to think? So to me, that's a major roadblock. And there is legislation, the Crown Act. Add anything to that?
I would, to add to that, I would just say collaboration. I think sometimes one of the things that hinders roadblocks is not having that voice at the table. As you plan things, as you plan to advance, to seek, to talk to a funding source, right, for example, right, for an entrepreneur, as you seek to bring on new talent, someone needs to be at that table and say, hey, did you ever think of this? Did you ever think of doing it this way? Did you ever think about reaching out to that source? So I think just having that eclectic set of voices at the table is also beneficial. Now, but you got to listen to it too, right? There's difference. And I always say the difference, having worked with gang members in Richmond, California, right? I say there's a difference between listening and hearing, right? You hear a gunshot, but you listen to a person, and you agree or disagree respectfully right from there.
I think it's a great point that you bring up, because we've heard a lot about that you've got to have a seat at the table, you've got to have a voice at the table, but simply being seated at the table does not mean that you're being heard. And so, I think that there has to be a willingness not only to have you sitting there, but also to have you have your voice be heard and contributing in a way that is making change. So, yeah.
You don't want to have a token person at the table, basically.
Right.
Is you want to, like you said earlier, spread a wide net and invite. I like to use this kind of image also, is not just send invitations to the party once you've already planned the party.
Yeah.
Send invitations out to help plan the party. And then you will have engaged planners who will want to stay for the party and invite their friends. So it's a very intentional act. I think we all have to be very intentional about this, authentic and intentional.
That's a great point. And I would say, because nothing sucks more than being a DEI person and not having your voice heard.
Right.
You say, do you really want me here? You have to, sometimes you got to say, for those that are looking to hire somebody or a diversity recruiter or whatever these things that entrepreneurs do, just like, are you sure, right? Because it's going to entail all these things we talked about before. Once again, it's not just race and gender; it's all these things, and it's going to take effort and resources, and a commitment to do it.
Absolutely. Hard work is involved in making change. And,
Yeah.
Absolutely. We do have a question. I'll go ahead and read this to you. What are practical ways to diversify my personal network? Everyone I know is like me, so I don't know how to attract diversity hires.
Well, I think Fred's probably, and you are doing a lot of hiring. I would say starting with some of that language in your, in the ads, what's that language look like and who is it targeted for? If you're getting the same people over and over, it's because whether you realize it or not, you're angling for a certain kind of person. And so there's an easy place to start.
Plan the party and invite people to help you plan that don't look like you. And you can join groups. There are so many ways of, line dance with Koreans and all, but there are so many ways. You just have to open up your doors of associations. Join groups, start your own group, and really be intentional about it. That's really the most important thing.
Well, and if I might say, the question is asking for some practical,
Correct. Yeah.
like things they can maybe do right now, some tangible takeaways.
Absolutely.
So perhaps reach out to the Black Chamber of Commerce, the Latin, is it Latino?
Latino Chamber.
Look for groups of Asian, South Asian, and ask them, what does this look like to you? Give it to them. Can you help me? So that way you have other people at the table that you're listening to that are contributing, who are helping you create that outline.
Yeah, I would actually, once again, this is my passion point here on the getting talent, because I think I don't know if we can cuss here or not, but I think it's crap when people say they can't find diverse talent. I think you're not trying hard enough. We talked about that before. So, in LinkedIn, there's groups. There's 30-something diverse groups in LinkedIn, for example, right? This is, once again, I don't claim to be an expert on this stuff. We're all trying to do stuff. There's also specific platforms based on, I use the term community group, that you want to reach to. So you can actually start posting position descriptions in targeted areas. Once again, you kind of cast a wider net to get the best talent. And that's what, that's the sourcing part of talent, right? Sometimes you're looking on LinkedIn, you got to pick up that call. You got to find that company. You got to say, hey, you're a UX person? Because it's tough to find some of these tech positions, right? So to post and pray and think that just by putting on your website, LinkedIn, maybe built in Denver, and think it's going to happen, it's not going to happen. You're going to have to either be very assertive, very aggressive, and cold call, as well as look at some of these specific platforms and get out there and do stuff. But it's very possible. To say it isn't is you're not trying hard enough.
Would you mind listing a couple platforms? Because maybe the people who are watching aren't even familiar with the platforms.
Yeah, if you give me, I'll jot some down and then add them to the chat. But I think the things that we just talked about. There's the chambers, there's other things, and then if you want to cast that international and national net, they're there as well.
That'd be great.
Yeah. So business networks. You have all sorts of chambers. Have Latino, Black, LGBTQ. This is all Boulder County. You have Asian. You have. There are various. There's social groups. I mean, Facebook has a million groups. Not to drop names, but you can find somebody there. There's another place called Meetup, and then those are the ones that I know. I'm dating myself because there's probably 100 more that are designed for younger individuals. So go play soccer if you want to meet brown people or whatnot, and so. I love the keyword that you used there, Betty, is that you have to be intentional. It's just like anything else. If you want to do it, you can make it happen. The internet is ubiquitous, is ginormous, and all you have to do is pick up your phone and speak what you want, and you're going to have 100 options come up to you on your screen.
Yeah. Okay. Great, thank you for that. I think we're going to move on to our next topic. I think we've covered roadblocks. The next one is, and we started this a bit, about how to increase awareness within your organization. So before we get into that, let's start out with kind of the legal requirements. And Sonia, you already talked about this, about the legislation that we should be aware. Is there any other legislation that we should be aware of out there that either helps or directly hinders DEI?
Well, we don't have time for all that.
We don't.
I
know.
I'm going to focus on the Crown Act. And so for people who aren't familiar, the Crown Act is creating a respectful and open world for natural hair. And the reason this is necessary, because some people will say, oh my goodness, now they're legislating their hair. The reason this is necessary is because I myself, as a professional woman, have had my hair grabbed at work. Children as young as 7 years old are being suspended from school because they have locks or they have twists or their mothers braided their hair or they have some sort of protective style that's been associated with gangs or, I don't think most 7-year-old children in school uniforms, as this little girl was, are probably in gangs. So this is something that is important for you as a business owner or an entrepreneur, because if I come in and I'm great for front of house, you like my style, you like the way I'm talking, you like my skill set, you're not quite sure about my hair and it's not going to look like this next week or the week after that or the week after that, then you have to ask yourself, like I said previously, about professionalism, and also know that this legislation is in place. So it's not enough just to teach about the microaggressions, just coming up behind me and grabbing a swath of hair and walking away. That's not okay. I don't know if anyone told you, but you should not touch other people's children. That's what my grandmother always said. So the Crown Act is one of those pieces, I think, it's an easy one, and it was passed here in Colorado. Governor Polis wore a crown on his head while he signed it, and partially for the children that were there, because this is who we're also doing this for, these upcoming generations, who hopefully won't live in a world where they're on the playground being licked to find out if they taste like chocolate. I'm not saying that happened to me personally.
Oh my goodness.
Does that answer
That answers yes.
the question?
Yeah.
Okay, and then
That's great.
and with the Crown Act, that's something that you can put together when you're talking about operations. Does that make sense? So if you create operations, and let's say that one of your workforce imperatives is let people be themselves, then you've got the Crown Act backing you up. And you can marry those two things together and create a policy so that it's not just talk, it's not just part of your mission statement, it's actually part of your operations policy so that there are consequences.
Let's talk about some really practical things. I think, Betty, this probably applies to you, but what are some actions that you've taken to change the culture within your organization to be more diverse, equitable, and inclusive?
Wow.
Put you on the spot. There's other people can
Yeah,
answer that too.
no. That's a good one. Well, I've had several different kinds of businesses. I want to say the restaurant, which was the one that tested us the most. What was the question again? What's the
What are some? What have you done?
what have we done?
What have you done to create this
To
type of
create
culture
that.
within your organization?
Well, I think really because, I'm an immigrant, so, and I grew up in New York City, which is like the place where there's people of every language and color and race and ethnicity. So it was not hard for me because as kind of like feeling comfortable around different people. So really in the hiring practices, and that business was in Boulder. Boulder is not the most diverse city. So I know it's a surprise. But we really encouraged the use of different languages. We created really an environment where people felt welcome from every walk of life also. I was actually thinking about this today, and one big mistake I made one time, hiring mistake, was, we had a Mexican restaurant, and this woman applied, and she was a little older, but had a lot of experience, and I was like, well, again, you can't, age is another, implicit bias, but it was, but she had a lot of experience and presented herself well and spoke well and all of that. So I said, okay, let's, we always had a little trial period, and she was good. So about a couple of months into her employment, I had a customer complain to me because they told me that she said that she didn't know what a jalapeno was. And that just it was like this bell of, wow, I made an assumption that because this was a Mexican restaurant, she would know what this was. And, the training was pretty simple. So, but it was like a kind of a reverse discrimination kind of thing, because I didn't push the envelope further as far as her cultural capability. So at that point, I realized we need to have all of our staff be totally culturally competent. So, and so we sponsored a softball team, and we also sponsored a soccer team. We really created that synergy within the organization so that people felt comfortable. And I think that's what you have to do. It has to come from you. You have to work on yourself, and then you create that space where people from all walks of life can contribute to your business and contribute positively because they love being there. Our customers used to say, I love walking in here because everybody's smiling and they love what they're doing. It was like, yeah, we do. So creating that space.
That space.
I think, yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Any other thoughts on that around how to either what you've done to build awareness or create that culture or change the culture in your place of employment?
Well, I'm not an expert in all of that. I mean, I'm more of an experiential guy, right? I've lived
Sure.
it, and that's a key word for me. That's one of those KPIs in DEI. Cultural awareness is an experiential, learned thing. I can't go tell you to be, equitable and understand my culture unless you've lived it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I like to think of, okay, so the assumption here is that we're in the United States talking about, the majority being the Anglo population, then we're the minority here. But what if a white guy goes to Brazil?
Right.
It's all the same thing, but in reverse. He's going to learn a lot and come back and be a different individual when he's back. And then he'll really understand all of this that we're talking about. So, being intentional in education, there are professionals out there. This question came up a couple of times. There are people that do this for a living that can teach us all in different ways how to understand cultural differences, cultural communications. The spoken word is also an assumption, loophole, if you want to call it that. And if you're afraid of it, go hire somebody. They'll be happy to help you out in educating your minority. You may be a small business. It's nice if we have a large company that can afford this. But what if you're a company of 5, a small restaurant of 7 employees? Come to one of the chambers, and we'll be happy to do something like this for you and help you get started at least. So be intentional and go ask for help. You don't have, we don't know everything, and we don't have to know everything.
Thank you for sharing that. We do have a question coming in related to this. Would anyone be able to provide a good example of a workplace imperative using equity? I am in the construction business that brings in many cultures. I'm not Howard Smith, our asker.
So what's the first part of the question?
Can anyone provide a good example of a workplace imperative using equity?
Okay, well, I will try, Howard, to help and hopefully Fred will jump in here. I think, so if you look at places that have great cultures, for example, it's controversial sometimes, but Google supposedly has great workplace culture. And one of their workplace imperatives is let people be themselves, magnify people's strengths. So that's something that you can use perhaps as one of your workplace imperatives. And then as far as being equitable, are you giving everyone the same opportunity to magnify their strengths? If someone's got a strength that that resonates with you, just on an individual level, I think sometimes we tend to magnify that person, maybe promote them, maybe look at them more. When you might have someone else who has a strength in an area where you're weak, and you need to magnify their strength as well. And maybe that's something that doesn't resonate with you because culturally it's different from you. But that's just something for you to take a look at. So that could be a workplace imperative. Magnify your people's strengths and recognizing that things that are culturally different from you may be a huge asset to your business.
I have to say something now. No, I think what I really like what you're saying because it's about maintaining this culture, right? That's part of the work I get to do now. And one of the things I'm a big fan of, from a practical sense, is there's a company out there called Corn Ferry, and they have these competencies, right? I think there's 36, 38 of them, something like that. And so as you hire people, you can bring those you can pick which competencies you want to keep because that's the culture you want to have in your company. You also talk about performance, annual conversations or quarterly conversations with your staff on those same competencies, right? Especially depending on the function area you want them to do. And then you want them to develop, right? So not everyone's going to be a hot 1 out of 10 with all these competencies, but you may want to be able to coach them up appropriately because then now you're having quality conversations. And that I think that's something you're looking for. In construction, if someone's hourly and they've got to get in and out, that's going to be tough to do. Mm-hmm. But if you can find a way to spend that time with them, especially if there's someone that you want to develop into a manager or somewhere, supervisor of people, it's well worth it because finding a good manager, because more times than not, we all probably seen it, people get bumped up into managers because they're the hardest working person and most knowledgeable in that area. That doesn't necessarily mean they should be managing people.
Right.
So.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Good performance does not necessarily mean they should be promoted. Sometimes they're best suited just for the job that they have. But all right. Well, in our last section, we've got just a few minutes here to talk about how to build a DEI community within the organization. Let me look over the questions here for a quick second. I think probably the best way to do this is from asking what we've done from our experience. What are some of the actions that you've taken to build bridges across different groups within an organization? Yes, Betty.
Well, one of the organizations that is pretty prominent in Boulder is Intercambio. And they've created, talk about building bridges, they've built bridges. And really getting involved with them in their fundraising. They are a nonprofit, and in their events, helping sponsor events. That was a huge thing for us. It not only it brought us together with this other community through that bridge building. And I think that's what would be worthwhile for any organization to find a group, a nonprofit, that they could help sponsor events or really get integrated in that community. I think it really would be helpful.
So building bridges, that's one of our vision statements of the Latino Chamber. But I'm going to look at my notes here because I wrote an answer or part of an answer for that. So I would say that, again, you have to be intentional. You have to want it hard enough that you're going to take actions on it. I would say that you know the importance of community engagement. You already said that. And ask yourself, does your business reflect your local community? Are you proportionally, because Boulder County is going to be different than somewhere in California or somewhere in Minnesota, right? So, if you can just look around and say, okay, my business looks like my community, that's a good starting point because it'll start all the conversations and all the issues that we mentioned here today. Is, being diverse, you have to start by being diverse. And if you don't know, if your assumptions are there, so you don't know what you don't know, then at least if you have the diverse group, then you can start inviting people to plan the party.
That's right.
Yeah. And one of the things I was jotting as I was getting to hear the team members here we could talk about is, I talked like bias training, ERGs. I also had, thinking about when with startup folks, there's the incubator and the accelerator, which allows you to network, right? If you would hopefully, if for those you get accepted into one of those, these really top tier ones, it's accelerator or incubators, you may want to check their diversity, right? You want to what their mission is. They're going to help you get started. There might be some funding involved, but if you really want to make sure your work represents the diverse client base that you want, as well as maybe a staff, you may want to check that out. But I think, sometimes low-hanging fruit, we see a lot of job descriptions now that talk about bias training and ERGs without really taking the time to do the other things that folks have talked about here. So there's no easy way to do this stuff. You commit, and you got to make it part of your business, your overall business plan.
Absolutely. We've got about 30 seconds left in our 15 seconds left. I'm going to ask the question, but is there any final thought that any of you that we didn't cover all of the questions that we laid out there? So is there any topic you're passionate about that you want to try and share in about 30 seconds?
I want to say be okay with being uncomfortable. I think that's the most important thing. If you are in your comfort zone all the time, then you're not doing the work that needs to be done to get where you want to go, especially when it comes to EDI.
All right.
I'd like to just offer a question for you guys, and it's this: what does DEI utopia look like to you? And once we don't have time to talk about this, but once you can answer that question for yourself, it'll give you a good path forward on and what to do next.
I think that's a great way to wrap it up. I mean, I think we've talked a lot about if we want to have DEI, we have to start internally first, and we need to be genuine. And then I think a great way to think about it is that, okay, what does it look like when we get there? What does the end result look like? So thank you all for being on the panel today. I think it's been a good discussion.
Thank you, everybody.
And I can get those resources. I'll get that to the organizers.
Yes,
And
if
then however you guys share it with the participants.
Yeah, we'll put up in chat. I think is what we'll do. So yeah, I think Dan, you had asked the question about some resources, and so we'll get those up in chat. Looking at the next session that we have coming up here is an introduction to employee ownership. We're going to be looking at what is it, and why would you choose to do it for your business? Ashley Ortiz of the Rocky Mountain Employee Ownership Center will teach us a little bit about how to learn about the different types of EO models, as well as the benefits they have for owners and employees, and then how you can start down the path of ownership towards that shared ownership in your own business. I will mention that there are a couple happy hours this afternoon, and so one of the great things about Longmont Startup Week is being able to connect with other people. And so the happy hours are from 4 to 7 p.m. at the Roost and Gross and Bart Brewery. So hopefully we'll be able to see you all there, and I don't know if any of the panelists are able to join us, but you might be able to connect with them as well. So with that, thank you all for us today.
Thank you. Thank you.